common reaction on a journey like this is to, first of all, want to replace an old belief system with a new one, or replace a role model with another one, and also to resist really firmly what doesn't fit into an old belief system. But non-duality is not a religion. It's hard to call it anything. You can't call it a theory. You can't call it a system of beliefs. It's not based on belief. And really, in its essence, it's only based on one thing. So it's hard to call it a philosophy. All the talking that happens here is extra, but it is necessary in a kind of transient way. We take the messages in, we play with them, we make as much sense as the mind can manage from them, but then we let them go when we realize that what used to really trouble the mind has now become this sort of incomplete view, and we're ready for the next incomplete view. There's always this kind of next incomplete thing. And something I read a while ago in the Tao Te Ching, which, by the way, used to be complete, just sounded like complete nonsense to me, was, if you want to be a master carpenter, use your own tools. If you use the master carpenter's tools, you'll cut your hand. And the way that I apply this is that if I am using a teacher's pointers exactly as they are, I'm likely to be led astray by my own mind, and to also really misunderstand things for long periods of time, or have a sense of not understanding. Something that I did, which led to me writing the book that I wrote, was about 10 years ago. I started writing all this down for myself and playing with the wording of it so that there could be a more natural, better understanding through this mind filter of what this truth was. But ultimately, of course, it isn't the mind that's going to understand this. We're using the mind to deconstruct itself. We use the mind to work through our old belief systems to the point that we become open enough to see what's right in front of us. So this is also where that statement comes from, I think, from the Bhagavad Gita. Yoga, or in this case, self-realization, is the journey of the self through the self to the self. Using mind as a tool to manage mind makes total sense, but trying to use the mind to understand the infinite, to understand its maker, doesn't make sense and isn't going to work. So this is where people will say, if a teacher says, it's actually really easy in the end, and all you need to do is relax. This is true. The mind is not going to be able to perceive, to understand any sense of how that could be the case, because the mind is one of 5 layers of our existence, layers of the existence of a human body and experience here. And I'll get into that more some other time. But these different layers, in short, in brief, are the physical body, the mental body, the energetic body, emotional, and then the wisdom body and the bliss body. Wherever our attention is absorbed is going to affect how we see this reality. If we're only focused on physical, energetic, and intellectual or mental layers, we're not going to have access to and familiarity with the wisdom body. And so when it does try to come through for us, we tend to mistake it, to not trust it. And this is why when teachers say the answers are within you, or the one answer is within you, we say there's no way that's possible. This mind is completely insane. And that is true. Most minds, the way the mind functions is insane. The sooner we realize that, the sooner we can drop attachment to the mind as our sole tool of navigating this planet. When we only operate using mind, it becomes inflated. Its importance, its own importance to itself, becomes inflated, and it affects our world. So if all attention is placed on mind activity, then the world is going to be such that it continues to encourage more mind activity. When we stop from the flow of that, we sit and meditate, or we start to place our attention on only one thing at a time while we're doing it, or watching it be done, then our world, the flow of mental activity and everything that keeps us in that layer will slow and then eventually almost diminish to the point that we use mind as a tool, as opposed to most of us in our current state, the mind using us to sort of carry out its own purposes. How can the mind use us if the mind is ultimately an illusion? Basically, mind is just a machine. It's just this part of the game, but wherever our attention is placed, so consciousness, wherever attention is placed is how the game is affected. If attention is placed on the mental layer, then the game is going to have a heavy mental element. When we can move beyond that, when we can let go of thinking, and we do that by recognizing that the thinking is false. All of it is false. Mind is not capable of producing a sound assessment of reality through no fault of its own. It's just how it's designed. So it's not our enemy. But we recognize the limitations of mind, how pervasive they are. Then the fuel that has been placed into mind will start to diminish. Because why do we need to pay so much attention to the mind when it's false? When its contents are false. In that way, we naturally begin to shift attention. Attention is naturally shifted to, away from mind, and then wisdom and bliss layers are naturally accessed or naturally come into the experience. This is how answers will suddenly dawn on us when we weren't trying. And when we begin to trust those answers, and we live from intuition and inspiration, life becomes effortless. And then we begin to understand what is said all this time, that life can be effortless and that the answers are within us. But until you are willing to let go of the old experience, your beliefs are going to continue to perpetuate the reality that supports the beliefs. It's like a cyclical thing. Belief creates the reality which confirms the belief. So what we're doing here with this work is letting go of our belief system and not taking on a new one, or perhaps we take on some new beliefs temporarily, knowing that we'll drop them eventually. In possible way that might apply is if we have a really strong sense of body negativity. Maybe in the meantime, we will shift from body negativity to body positivity. So we go from saying, I don't like my body, here's what's wrong with it, to saying, okay, my body's great, here's all the good things it does. But that's temporary. And what we would eventually shift to is, my body, this body, isn't me, and I accept it unconditionally, which is not based on any of the attributes about it. So we can apply this to our sense of self as well. We may go from not loving ourselves to then understanding that the love is the true self, and that none of this work we've been doing actually applies to who we really are. One day, you may be doing this work or taking a break from this kind of thing and listening to a talk or hearing pointers some other way. And suddenly, a shift just occurs where you go from hyper focus on this small self and the affairs of it to a softer focus to everything around. And in that moment of relaxation and openness, there may be wisdom that just comes through internally, or maybe the wisdom from a pointer is suddenly understood on a deeper level than the actual pointer, deeper level than the mind. And in that case, it's experience firsthand, and experiential knowledge is the unmistakable. That's the one that is beyond being contested. So in all of this, not just speaking for myself, but any teacher, anyone with a YouTube channel of any kind, any book you read, don't believe what you hear. Take it in, see what resonates, but ultimately what we are doing is sort of bouncing things off of the true self, bouncing things off of the wisdom layer, working on moving away from the mental, the physical, and the emotional layers as being the entirety of our experience, beginning to see cracks appearing in our old reality based on that openness.